I do want to add a few more sources. Now I can click on the plus icon down below to add additional sources, or I could also drag and drop items directly into OBS. Here I have a logo sitting on my desktop. This is a PNG file. I can simply click on it and then drag it over onto my scene. Here now I see my logo file appears and it's for the Kevin Cookie Company. Now just like with all the other items, I have this red rectangle around the item and I could resize my logo. Now I want to position this right above my video image. Now I could click on my video and I could reposition this as well. So now that's looking pretty good. I have my logo and I have my video. I also want to include a border around my video. Right now it seems like it's just kind of hanging there over the background. To add a border, let's go down to sources and I'll click on the plus icon. For this, I want to add a color source. Let's click on that. I'll leave the default name and then click on OK. This opens up properties for color source. I'm going to move this over a little and I want to use the same blue that appears in my logo. Here I could click on select color and I want to pick a screen color. Let's click on that. Over here I can hover over my logo and I'll take this blue color. Next, let's click on OK. So I now have this color source. Let's click on OK there and now I see a rectangle with that color source. I'm going to adjust the size of this and I'll put it right over my video. Now you'll see that the video sits in back of the color source. I want the color source to be a border for my video, so I want it in back of my video source. Down here within sources, I can see all the different sources within the scene. Now the item at the top is the topmost layer. The item at the bottom is the bottommost layer. Now I want my color source to appear behind my video capture device, so I'll simply click on this item and then drag and drop it behind the video device. I could also use these up and down arrows to shift the layers of the different items. So here now you see I have this color source behind my video capture device. Of course, the border is pretty thick right now, so when I have color source selected, I can reposition this, and just like I did before, I can use the Alt key to crop the size of this color source. So here I'll do it so it's a nice border around my video, and that looks pretty good now. Now, as I'm working on my scene, I might want to make some sources visible and some sources not visible. So let's say I wanted to work on the desktop and having my video here is somewhat distracting. I can go down here and there's an eye icon. When I click on that, that'll hide that source. So I could hide all these topmost items. I could simply toggle that again to re-show those different items. Now let's say I'm all done positioning my video and the logo. I might want to lock those items so I don't disrupt their current position. So I've now locked those 3 items and I can move my desktop around and I don't have to worry about mistakenly clicking on my logo or the video because those are now locked in that position. Now that I've locked the position, this is one unit right here. So I have the logo, the video, the color source. I really view this as a group. Now I can click on the sources and I'll press the Shift key to select these 3 items. So the logo, the video, and the border. I can now right click on this and I could group the selected items. Let's try this. I'm going to call this group logo and video. Now I'll click on enter and I can collapse this group so it helps clean up my list of sources, and this way I know when I select this item I can show that whole group or I can hide the whole group, so it helps organize my sources a little bit better. My new scene is all together now, and at this point I can now start streaming, I could start recording, I could start my virtual camera, so I could basically go live with this. Now let's say that maybe I have my webcam up here, but then I want to hide it because maybe I want people to focus on the full screen and not my face. Well, over here on the left hand side I can click on the other scene and this will shift the scene back to just my full desktop. Now let's say I'm done explaining the whole desktop, I can now click on my scene and that'll show me again here in the bottom right hand corner. Now one of the problems is when I click on these different scenes, it's a little bit of a hard cut. What if I want to have more of a transition? Well, that brings us to this category here called scene transitions. Right now it's set to simply cut, but I have all these other transitions that I can set. Let's pick the swipe transition instead. So I could select this, I'll click on OK for that name. Here I could preview what the transition looks like. That looks good. Let's click on OK. I now have a swipe transition. So when I'm streaming, when I'm recording, I can now click on the other scene and now you see it swipes away. If I want to go back to my webcam image now, I can click on that scene and once again that also swipes it away. So here I could choose from many different transitions and I could customize the transitions to make make my recording or my stream look better. Now, just like before, I don't want to have to open up OBS to shift between my scenes. Instead, here too, I can also set shortcut keys. If I go to the top left-hand corner, once again, let's click on File, click into Settings, and then go to Hotkeys. Within this list, I see my different scene names. Here's the desktop capture with webcam, and I see my scene. I can set a shortcut key to switch to this scene. For example, I'll set F2 to switch to the desktop with webcam, and then for my full desktop, I'll set that to Alt 3. Next, I'll click on Apply, and then OK. Back within the main screen here, now if I want to jump between scenes, I'll press Alt F3, that jumps back to my desktop, and Alt F2, and that jumps back to my scene with the webcam. So here too, I could set shortcut keys to kick off my recording, and I could set shortcut keys to switch my scenes. Now that we've looked at how you can seamlessly switch between scenes, I want to show you some additional functionality related to sources. Down here within sources, when you select one of your sources, you'll see some buttons that appear right up here. Here you could return to your properties, and you could also jump into filters. I'm going to select my webcam image, and then let's see what filters we have. Within filters, up in the top left-hand corner, I have audio and video filters, and then down below I have some effect filters. Let's first take a look at some of the audio filters. Here you have all sorts of different audio filters that you could apply. For instance, the gain, the limiter. One of the interesting ones is you have noise suppression. So let's say that you're streaming or you're recording in a louder environment. Maybe you have a dog barking, or maybe the landscapers are outside. You can use noise suppression to cut all that out. Down below, I also have effect filters. Let's click on that to see what we could do. I could apply different LUTs. I could use a chroma key. Let's say I have a green screen in back of me and I want to remove it. I could use a chroma key for that. I could correct the color. Here I could crop my video here too, and you could even set something up to scroll. So let's say you inserted text into your scene, you could have that scroll across your screen. So there are all sorts of different filters that you could play with. It's definitely worth some time looking in here and seeing what you can do. Along with being able to apply filters to individual sources, I could also transform a source. So what does that mean? Well, here down below, I'll click on the group that I created with the logo in the video. When I right click on this, there's the option for transform. With transform, I could rotate items, I could flip items, or I could also center them on the screen. Here, I'll click on center to screen, and here you see that my logo and webcam jumps to the center. I'll move it back to the corner, but here with transform, I could very quickly make changes to my different sources. We've been looking at many of the different ways you can take advantage of the power of OBS, but I also want to show you how you can make the experience your own. Now, so far we've been using the user interface as it comes out of the box. You can adjust things to meet your needs. For instance, I could click on controls and I could drag it out of the experience. Or maybe I want to put scene transitions over on the left-hand side. I can move these different items wherever I want. Now, let's say you move a bunch of things and you want to reset it. Well, you could simply right click on an item and then click on Reset UI, and that'll return it back to the original state. Along with being able to customize the user interface, you can also set up multiple profiles. Up here, there's a menu for profiles. So what is a profile? Well, let's say you go into File Settings and you go through and you make a whole bunch of modifications to these settings. You can set up a profile to store all of those settings. So maybe you have one profile for streaming, and then you have a different profile with a different set of settings for recording. You can then very quickly jump back and forth between those profiles. Another way that you can customize the experience is using something called scene collections. And what is a scene collection? Well, the easiest way to describe it is it's a group of scenes. So just like a scene has multiple sources under it, a scene collection can have multiple scenes under it. So it's basically one level up from scenes. Probably the easiest way is to simply show. I'll click on scene collections and I'll jump to my scene collection that I use for my YouTube channel. So here you see I have an entirely new set of scenes and then sources under those scenes. If I want to jump back to my other scene collection, I could simply click here, and now you see the scenes that we created together. We've covered quite a bit of functionality today, but the last thing I want to touch on is how you can use Studio Mode. Over on the right-hand side, there's an option called Studio Mode under the controls, and you could use this when you're streaming or when you're recording. Let's click into this to see what we can do. Within Studio Mode, you see a preview over on the left-hand side, and then I see the program over on the right-hand side. The easiest way to think of what program means is when you're streaming or when you're recording, this is what's being recorded or this is what's being streamed. Over on the left-hand side, we see a preview. Now with the preview, I can move different items around. So I could click on my desktop, I could adjust the size. So maybe I want to modify things. Now anything I'm doing over on the left, that's not being recorded and it's not being streamed. So I can make adjustments over on the left, and let's say that, while I'm streaming, I want to change my view to look like this. I can then click on transition, and this now goes live out to my audience where I'm streaming or when I'm recording. Alright, well that was a quick look at how you can get started using OBS. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. To see more videos like this in the future, hit that subscribe button. If you want to see me cover any other topics, leave a comment down below and I'll add it to my list of videos to create. Alright, well that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed and I hope to see you next time. Bye.
Hi there, my name is Dan Scott and I'm an Adobe certified instructor here at Envato Tuts Plus. And together, me and you are going to learn everything you need to know to get started with Adobe Photoshop. Now this course is for absolute beginners. There is no need to have any previous Photoshop knowledge or any photography or design knowledge for that matter. Okay, we're going to start right at the beginning and work our way through step by step. Now, we're not going to go through every single tool and every one of its features. What we're going to do is we're going to work through real-world practical examples in Photoshop. Then we'll learn the tools and features necessary to make it a really an amazing image. We'll start by getting the most out of our photographs, correcting the light and the color, also how to change the colors completely in Photoshop. We'll spend some time with text, showing you how to distort it along with all of its effects. I'll share some amazing cropping and resizing tricks, as well as exciting ways to transform and distort images so we can fake mockups like this. I'll show you all my special retouching tricks, cleaning up small imperfections, as well as removing larger parts from images. Before the end of this course, you'll be able to make simple masks like this, but you'll also have the skills for super tricky masks like this out of focus here. There's lots more as well, like mastering layers, knowing the best practices for exporting images and sharing them. It's just a really good foundation for getting started with Photoshop. I set some exercises through the course so that you can practice the skills while you're learning. So if you've never opened up Photoshop or you've opened it and you've struggled with it, follow me and I will show you the best ways to make beautiful images in Adobe Photoshop. Alright, it is time to get started. Now, the first thing you can do is you can download the source files. The source files are just the files that we use throughout the course, so you can download those and play along. You can also, there are projects that get set during the course, okay? Not homework, there are super exciting things to do together, okay? But if you want to share those with us, okay, there is a forum post to use, so go to the forums and search for Adobe Photoshop for Beginners. Also, you can share on social media. Twitter, we are Tuts Plus Design, or Dan Loves Adobe, okay, or on Instagram, it's Bring Your Own Laptop. Okay, so share what you get up to. Next thing we need to do is we need to reset our workspace. We'll jump into the computer now, and yeah, we'll do that now. All right, so first thing we need to do is let's just get our screens all looking the same so you can follow along easily. So first, just go up to Window, down here to Workspaces, and it doesn't really matter what yours is set to. Let's change it to Essentials. Okay, so what we're also going to do is we're going to reset Essentials. So back up to Window, Workspaces, and just click this one that says Reset Essentials. And that's just going to get yours looking like mine, so yeah, it's a little easier to follow along. All right, so boring stuff over, exciting stuff next video. Let's start looking at layers in Photoshop. Hi there, in this video we're going to look at layers. We're going to do some adjustments to this image, all on different layers so we can see the different effects and really just get to understanding how layers work. All right, let's get started in this video. Okay, so first thing to do is let's go up to File and let's go to Open. Now, from the files that you've downloaded, okay, open up O1 layers. Okay, this image comes to us free from Milos Tronczynski. I practiced that. Let's open them up. Thanks, Milos. So the first thing we need to do is make sure you can see a layers panel. Mine's over here. If you can't see it, go to window and just make sure the tick is on layers. What we might do is see this libraries panel here. We're going to look at him later in the course, but he takes up quite a lot of screen real estate. Now, my screen's quite big. Yours is probably not. When I'm working on my laptop, see these little double chevrons? I always go through and just close this down, okay, just to give yourself a little bit more room. Okay, so down here in my layers panel, I've got one layer. By default, when you're opening up a JPEG, you'll get given the word background and it'll be locked, okay? What we want to do is right click the background, okay, and go to this one that says duplicate layer. We're going to give it a name. We're going to call ours auto tone, okay, and that's the first of the automatic features. We're going to click OK. Now it hasn't changed anything. I've just got two layers sitting on top of each other. Okay, I've got auto tone and auto background. Now with the auto tone layer selected, okay, it's kind of this light gray, or in earlier versions of Photoshop, it's kind of a blue color. So with it selected, let's go up to image and let's go to auto tone. You ready? Stand back and pretty cool, huh? Pretty cool little automatic feature. Now what auto tone's doing is it's looking at the highlights, midtones, and shadows and trying to find kind of a better than the original we had. Okay, so it goes and does that for us. A nice little quick automatic feature. When do I use that? I use that quite a lot when I'm doing maybe images that they're not going to be like the front cover of a magazine or the hero image for a design. It's just, I want a quick fix. Okay, I've taken them on my phone or something and they're not quite perfect. I'm going to go through and use something like auto tone before I say upload them to social media. So over here in my layers panel, the thing to look at is auto tone. Okay, it's a little hard to see. The thumbnails are slightly different. What we can do is turn the eyeball off on this auto tone layer. Just click the eye right in the middle. Okay, and now we can see the layer underneath, which is the background. So the background's still there, he's protected, he's not being wrecked, okay? And I can turn this top one on and off easily to compare the two. Now, when you're working with layers, you're always looking from the top down. So imagine you're always a bird flying above and you can see auto tone, and I could turn the eye on and off for background, but nothing happens, okay? It's because auto tone's covering it, okay? So I could turn you off and then you off. Okay, so that's, I guess what we're doing in this video is getting an understanding of layers. Let's do the next of the automatic features. So let's turn off the eyeball. Okay, so I turned off auto tone. Let's select the background layer and right click it again and go to duplicate layer. Let's look at the other feature. Okay, it's called auto contrast and let's click OK. Then with that layer selected, it should be automatically. Let's go to image and let's go one of the other options. Okay, it's better. Okay, the colors are a bit strange still. So note that we've used auto contrast and it's given us a result. Now let's compare it to auto tone by turning on this auto tone layer. On, off, on, off. Sometimes it can be a little hard in this course to see the differences depending on the video quality that you're kind of receiving. So I can see a really clear difference between, I like auto tone better, like stronger darks. Now don't think auto contrast is just broken or doesn't work. Okay, what you'll find is it depends on the image. Sometimes I open up stuff and auto tone does a horrible job, auto contrast does a great job. So open up your image and basically test all three of these. Okay, figure out which is the best, and then say you've got another 10 images to do, then as long as they're kind of photographed in a similar sort of situation, you can often not have to try all three. Just go to the one that works. So we've got auto tone, which is nice, my favorite, auto contrast and background. So let's turn the two eyes off on this top one. Let's look at the last of those automatic features. Right click background, let's go to duplicate layer, call it auto tone. Nope, we're using auto color, and let's click OK. Let's go up to image and let's just set this one. Pretty good. Okay, it's pretty close to auto tone. Now, if I turn them all on, what I want to do is, I know auto contrast is not that great. So I'm gonna turn it off. And what happens is, if I have this off, remember you're the bird flying on top. If I wanna compare auto tone with color, okay, I can turn auto tone at the top, And as long as auto contrast is off, if I turn this eyeball off, you'd imagine you're seeing auto color. Turn it back on. You can kind of see I'm toggling between these two here, okay, to see the difference. You have to experiment a little bit and play around, okay. If it makes it a little easier, sometimes like this guy here, you can just select on him and click on the trash can, okay, if he's wrong, okay, keeps the layers a little bit tidier. You can also drag them. Let's say that we want auto contrast on the bottom. So we want it underneath auto color, not underneath background. Okay, he's at the back. So click, hold, and drag auto contrast, and you'll see that, can you see this little blue line appears? Okay, that little blue line, it's a little hard to see, that's where he's gonna go. Okay, I would like you to play around. I'm gonna set you a little task. I would like you to have auto, I want them alphanumeric order. So auto, oh my ABCs, auto colors at the top, then auto contrast, and then auto tone at the bottom. Okay, just to practice dragging them. That's all I want you to do, really. And you'll notice that the difference between, say, auto color and auto contrast, on the video, it might be so minutely different, just a slight color change. And then it's up to personal preference. Do you like auto color better or auto tone better? Now you could go through, open up a bunch of images, and just run that one automatic feature. All right, so that's a basic introduction to layers, and we looked at some of the cool little automatic features in Photoshop. Now we're going to use layers all throughout this course, so if you're finding like, man, heck, that was confusing with layers, don't worry, we're going to kind of work through them every video looking at layers, and you'll get a bit more comfortable with them. One of the things we'll have to do before we go though is save this document. Now we opened it up, remember it was a JPEG when we opened it. Now if I go to File, Save, okay, it's going to say, you can't be a JPEG. Why is that? JPEG can't have more than one layer. JPEG just have the background layer and that's it. If you had not created these other layers, it would have just saved over the top of the original. Okay, but Photoshop says, hey, you can't be a JPEG, so you're gonna have to be this Photoshop file. It's a PSD, there he is there. Okay, and I'm happy for you to save it straight back into the source files using the same name. The only thing different will be the PSD. Don't change any of the settings, okay, and just click Save. This little Photoshop format options opens up every single time. Don't worry about this, okay? It just means that Photoshop's asking, if I save this as a PSD, do you want me to save it as a maximum compatibility version? And all that means is that it's more likely to open in really old versions of Photoshop. Okay, so I always leave this on. It makes the file size slightly bigger, but just leave it on and click on Don't Show Again because it's not something that needs to pop up every time. I'm going to leave mine on because I'm an instructor and I need to explain this thing. It's a pain, but hey ho, let's leave it on there. Let's click OK. Cool. So let's finish this off by going to File and Close. And before you go, let's practice that. So let's go to File and go to Open. And I want you to, on your own, open up the O2 layers, the Tavin Dodson. Thank you very much for the image. Let's click Open. And I'd like to set you a task. I want you to go through, duplicate the background layer. You'll end up with 4 layers in total. Okay, and I want you to practice with these 3 different automatic features. Then I want you to reorder them to the one at the top that you feel is the best. Remember, it's not always 100% perfect. Okay, it's a bit of personal judgment, but drag the one that you think is the best to the top of the layers group, okay, and stack them up. Just a bit of practice. All right, I'll see you in the next video where we are going to look at a little bit more of Photoshop kind of foundations, where we show you how to work with multiple images, kind of copy and paste from one to the other and how that works. All right, I will see you in the next video. Hello friends, in this video we're going to look at kind of basic navigation of Photoshop. Okay, we learned a little bit in the last videos with layers, but now we're going to start moving things around and resizing them. Okay, so we're going to combine 1, 2, 3 images and put them all together on this one in these nice little cubes. Okay, so a few little shortcuts, promise not too many, but just the things that get used quite a lot. It's best to use the teeny tiny shortcuts. I promise not to overwhelm you much. All right, let's get started now. All right, so to learn our kind of workflow features, we need to open up all of those images that we want to combine. So we're going to go to File and we're going to go to Open. And we're going to be using these from Jessica Nolden. Okay, thank you very much, Jessica. And it's the O3. Okay, there's an A, B, C, and D. Now you can click one and just click Open and open them all individually if you find that more useful. A little trick though is select the first one, hold Shift, click the last one. Okay, and they should all be selected and click Open. Now, what's happening is you can see along the top here, I've got these tabs. So all the images are open in tabs. If for some reason yours doesn't, okay, that's the default. But if it doesn't, go to Window, Arrange, and just click Consolidate on all tabs. Now there's probably about 3 or 4 ways of combining images. Now I'm just going to show you the one that's the most bulletproof and reasonably easy. So we want to, this first image here, this is where we want to get those little squares. So this first one here, the way to kind of drag it to this tab here is literally kind of dragging it. So we're going to grab the Move tool, which is the first one in our little toolbar here. And you click and hold with your left mouse arrow. Okay, click and hold the center of this image and drag it to this other tab. It's a bit weird. Okay, so click, hold, drag. The mouse is down the whole time, and I just hover above this tab and Photoshop automatically switches to this one. I've still got the mouse down the whole time, and then I move my mouse key down here and let go. Okay, so the big thing for that, it does feel a bit weird. Okay, I'm going to drag it into place. Now, you have the mouse down the whole time. Okay, if that went horribly wrong or didn't work at all, okay, I'm going to go to Edit and I'm going to go to Step Backwards. That just kind of undoes. I'm going to keep going step backwards until it's gone. Okay, and I'm going to practice again with you guys. So back to this tab, Move tool, click, hold, drag in the center. I'm just holding down my mouse key, holding it down, holding it down, holding it down. Okay, you do get used to it after a while. It's a strange one. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll do the same for this O3C. Okay, so click, hold, drag the center of it, and then move it in here. Okay, I'm going to try and line them up nicely. Okay, you'll notice that Photoshop's pretty clever and tries to kind of automatically align things. Okay, if yours doesn't align, go to View and come down and just make sure Show and the Smart Guides is on. It's probably on by default, but I'm just in case it's not. Okay, so View, Show, Smart Guides. Great, so that works for all images, and it's going to be quite protective when we look at things later on called layer masks and adjustment layers. That dragging option is the best way to do it, in my opinion. Okay, the last one is going to throw us a little bit. This one has a different size, so the same technique works, right? So I click, hold, drag it to my first tab, let go, but it's ginormous. Okay, so this is going to happen to you, where sometimes the images can be really, really big, like it can go 2 kilometers that way, okay? So you need to kind of get them down to a proportionate size. So this is going to be our kind of next bit of navigation. Now, we're going to be learning zooming in and out first. Okay, so for this to work, I need to zoom out a little bit. So there is a magnifying glass over here, okay, which you can click once to zoom in, and over here you can click it to minus, and now this thing, when you click once, will zoom out. So you just toggle between these two here. Now, you can definitely do it that way, but what you'll find is that it's such a common thing you do in Photoshop. Everybody learns the shortcut quite early. Now, if you hold down the Command key on a Mac, or the Control key on a PC, and just tap the plus button on your keyboard. Okay, just up on the top of your keyboard there. Plus to zoom in, minus to zoom out. Okay, we're not going to go through too many shortcuts here, but there's just a couple that you really need to know early on. What I'd like you to do is zoom out to kind of this level, doesn't really matter, just so you can see the edges, because what we'd like to do is shrink this guy down. Okay, so I've got that layer selected. I'm going to go to Image, nope, I'm going to go to Edit. I'm going to go to Transform, and we're going to use Scale. So Scale is one you use quite often. We're going to cover all of these in a later tutorial, but for kind of fundamental navigation, you're going to need to move things and scale it. Okay, so we'll just cover this quickly now. So Edit, Transform, Scale. You'll see that's why we zoomed out, so we can see the edges of these boxes. Okay, so what you can do is if you grab the edge, you drag it around, you can rescale it down. The only trouble doing it this way is that you can see it kind of distorts the image. So I'm going to go to Edit, Undo. And what I want to do is I'm going to hold down a shortcut. Okay, so I'm going to hold down the Shift key. We won't do too many shortcuts, I promise. Okay, but hold down the Shift key and grab any of the corners before you start dragging. Okay, and that just means it will scale the height and width, kind of a fundamental Photoshop thing. Okay, so once you get it to a size you kind of like, okay, sometimes if you're new, you're sitting here like me, looking at your hands and going, do I let go of the Shift first or the mouse key first? Okay, it's always the mouse. Okay, anytime you're thinking that, it's always the mouse. Let go of the mouse first. Okay, and then you can let go of the Shift key. And I'm going to drag mine in kind of close, and you see it kind of lined up nicely. And what I might do now is just drag it so it's the perfect width to match these other guys. Now, zooming in a little bit, who remembers the shortcut? You all do, okay? So on a Mac, it's Command+. If you're on a PC, it's Control+. Okay, zoom into a nice kind of size. And this brings us on to our next kind of fundamental navigation feature that we need to learn in Photoshop. Okay, and it's just moving around this canvas. So you can see I can't see the bottom here. Now the long painful way is grab any of these sliders and drag it down. And that is fine when you're really new. Okay, and I threw a lot of shortcuts into this tutorial, just one more. Okay, hold down the spacebar key. See my little arrow here? The spacebar key transforms into the little hand. Okay, so spacebar key and just kind of click, hold, and drag your mouse. So spacebar down, click, hold, drag around. Okay, or use these little slidey handles. They are totally fine. All right, and what I'd like to do is just resize it a little bit more so it matches these sizes. So what's the key I hold down to make sure the height and width is the same? You remember, it's the shift key. So holding shift, drag it up and just get it kind of close. We're not looking for perfection right at this moment. We'll cover a little bit more later on. Okay, get it close. Now, when you're finished, you need to kind of say, Photoshop, I am done, to get rid of these like little marks around the outside, because you'll find that some of, you see my menus just don't work now. Okay, because it's saying, I'm halfway through this thing, please. Dan, finish it off by hitting return on your keyboard or the enter key. Okay, and that just kind of gets it to where I need. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, which is, you remember, Command minus or Control minus. Okay, and what I'm going to do is with my move tool, okay, and now depending on if you've turned yours on or off, make sure auto selects on. Okay, and I can click and drag this one up here. I'm going to drag this one here and this one here. Oh, beautiful. All right, my friends, that is going to be it. So just to recap, to move things from one image to another, or at least one tab from another, use your move tool. Click, hold, drag it up to the tab, hold the mouse key down the whole time and let go of it. Now, if you end up with problems with it being the wrong size, you go to edit, go to transform and use scale. And if you want to lock the height and the width together, what do? That's right, shift key, hold that down. Okay, and the other two things we learned was some shortcuts. Okay, zooming in, which is Command plus or minus on a Mac, or Control plus or minus on a PC. And once you're in really close, okay, you can drag around with these guys or hold down the spacebar key to move around. Click, hold, and drag your mouse. All right, friends, let's get on to the next video where we start looking at something called levels, probably the thing I use the most in Adobe Photoshop. All right, let's go there now. Hi there, in this video we're going to look at something called levels. Basically, they get the shadows and the highlights and the midtones all to look really nice. Okay, let's take this image here. Okay, it looks great, but then we add levels and looks more amazing. All right, it's the foundation. It's the thing that I do most in Photoshop when opening up a new photograph. Let's go learn how to do that now in Photoshop. All right, so first up, let's go to File and go to Open. And in your source files, open up O4A. Okay, this one here. It is a photograph by Errol Ahmed. Okay, and let's click Open. All right, so let's look at opening the levels. Now there's a couple of ways of opening it in Photoshop. And if you've done Photoshop a long time ago, you might have used this method here. Let's not use these. These here are very destructive. So we're going to use the non-destructive methods, okay, which is basically this adjustments panel here. If you can't find it, just go to Window and just open up adjustments. And you got to hover above them. After a while, you work out what these little icons do. But can you see here, I've hovered above it with my mouse and you can see, whoop, there is where levels is written. Okay, so I'm going to click on this one here. This is definitely for me as a amateur photographer, but professional designer. I use this one the most when I'm fixing up my images because I need a lot of work with my imagery. Now this complicated looking thing opens up. It's called the histogram. It's not complicated. Well, it's not very hard to use, which is nice. Basically what we're looking at is information from images. This is all the, see this little dark house here and the white house? This is everything that is really dark in the shadows, and this is everything that's really bright like lights. Okay, and you can see here it's missing a little bit of information there and a little bit there. Now what you do with levels is you basically just drag this black slider up into the first little mountain here. Okay, so click, hold, and drag it. And you notice over here in my image, if I click, hold, and drag, as I drag it, okay, and I get closer to this kind of peak here, the blacks become a lot stronger. If I go too far past this like first rise, watch this, it starts kind of like getting kind of weird. Okay, so there is not a perfect adjustment, but you just drag it here, basically the beginning of the first hill. Okay, the same on the other side. So there are whites in here, but they're not super strong. To make them nice and strong, all we do is grab this white little kind of house thing here, drag it to the left, and do I want to drag it all the way in here? No, because it starts, I start overexposing some of these whites and they start blurring together. So it's kind of the beginning of the first little hill. There it is there. Okay, so often just dragging those two in, tucking the two ends in will get you your strong whites and your strong blacks. Now the middle slider here, the gray slider, is all your midtones. Now this will depend on the image. Basically every image that I open up, I often tuck in the ends, okay, and they both come in. Now where does this middle slider go depends on the image. If I drag it all the way to the right, darkens it down, all the way to the left, it lines it up. And this will really depend on your image and what look you're looking for. Okay, so I'm just dragging mine back and forth and I'm looking at my image, not my slider over here. Okay, looking at the image and just finding where I feel it's nice. Now, I didn't need to move it much at all. And that is correcting an image kind of 101. I do this, the first thing I do before I do anything else in Photoshop is just get the levels right. Now to check whether you've made this thing better or worse than when you opened it, you can see here, this is called an adjustment layer. So these are the levels. You can see it's appeared in my layers panel. The cool thing about that is that I can turn it on and off. Okay, like we did earlier on when we did our automatic features, you can turn this on and off. Okay, so turn the layer off, I can see the background underneath, and that's what it started like. And it looked fine when we open it. It's not until we do the levels that you're like, okay, man, there was a bit more in that image I could have got. Okay, so yeah, that is levels. What I'd like you to do now is save this image. Okay, it's going to ask you to call it a PSD, and that is great, Photoshop document. And I'd like you to open up the second example. Okay, and I'd like you to practice on your own. So it's 04B, okay, and open up this one here, and yeah, practice the same thing. Create adjustments layer, okay, under levels, and yeah, see how you go. Tuck in the two ends, and then decide where that middle slider goes. And this will be a cool time to share what you've done and kind of what, what your end result would be. So check us out on social media, and that's at Tuts Plus Design. I'm Daniel Loves Adobe, and on Instagram, I am Bring Your Own Laptop. So take a screenshot, save a JPEG. I'd love to see what your end result with that second example is. All right, so let's get on to the next video where we look at vibrance, okay, getting and extracting amazing color from your images. All right, let's go and do that now. Hi there, in this video we're going to look at vibrance, and we're going to do this before and ready after. Okay, I've gone a little overboard to exaggerate the effect for the intro, okay, but let's back it off a little bit and let's look at kind of some real world use in this video. All right, let's get started. All right, first up, let's go to File, Open. And if you did the previous tutorial and you did the homework that I set, which was this one here, 04B, have that one open because we're going to use that one. If you didn't and you skipped ahead, you can open up 05A, and I've done the homework for you. Let's click open. Basically, this is the image we want open. You might have done the levels yourself. You might skip to this one here where I've done them for you. So levels is the first thing that I do. The next thing is vibrance. Okay, so with the layer selected, let's go to our adjustments panel, and it's this kind of like V here. Okay, it's the last one on the top right. Click on vibrance. Now vibrance, if you are like maybe old school Photoshop and you're kind of getting back into it, saturation was the only option before. And saturation and vibrance are, I guess, interesting things to compare. So vibrance is the best one to use in my opinion. Okay, watch this. If I crank the vibrance up, things just get more amazing. Okay, or the big difference is that you can see some of these images or some of these colors here at the front here, especially these pinks and these yellows, they're actually quite strong already. What vibrance does is when it lifts them up, it starts lifting up other colors, supporting colors in the background, whilst leaving these. They go up a little bit, but not as much as some of these background colors. So let's look at this green here. Okay, if I lower that back down to about 0, it's kind of washed out. And instead of increasing them all equally, it leaves some of these more saturated ones or alone. Okay, and brings up some of the other ones to meet it. The difference between that and say saturation, watch this, if I crank up saturation, to get this kind of green to come out, these guys end up going a little bit overboard. Okay, you might like that effect. Okay, there's no kind of like right or wrong. It's more, this was probably going to give you the more natural effect. So increasing the vibrance. How far do you go? You can max it out. Okay, that's totally fine. Often, depending on the quality of the initial photograph, it's only kind of slight adjustments just to kind of lift the colors. +40 in this image works for me.
down the bottom here, remember the eyeball, on and off this vibrance layer just to see if I made this better or worse. You can see it's just lifting, say, these blues back here and these greens here just to make a more colorful image or more vibrant image. I might go up even a little higher. You can do both. Okay, bit of saturation and a bit of vibrance. Not normally what I do. Cool. So that is vibrance, and that's kind of like, I guess, lifting the colors, leaving some of the saturated ones alone. What I'd like you to do is save this document, close it. Okay, it'll save as a PSD, and I want you to open up the second version. Okay, this one here is Justina Poon. Okay, open up her image. Okay, and I'd like you to do the same thing. Go to Adjustments panel, go to this little kind of V and see, and this one here, I want to do it with you. Okay, I said it for homework, but I'm doing it with you. Why? Because this one's a really clear example of that's already really saturated, but say this, I'd say rooster chicken, okay, is not. So watch this when it comes up. Okay, vibrance lifts the color of this chicken here, but leaves this fine. Whereas saturation, okay, ends up blowing this out to get this color going. So have a practice with this, even though I just did it with you, and save it. I'd like to see your final result. Okay, so check us all out on social media. Twitter is Tuts Plus Design, and on Twitter I'm Dan Loves Adobe. Or if your favorite is Instagram, I am Bring Your Own Laptop. I'd love to see what you did. All right, let's get into the next video where we start looking at adjusting kind of specific hues. At the moment we just made everything a bit better. Okay, let's say we have a color shift and there's a little bit too much color. We can start doing some more selective adjustments. All right, I'll see you in the next video. Hi there, in this image we are going to look at hues, which is basically just colors in Photoshop, and we are going to look at doing kind of selective colors there where we leave the stalk alone but we can adjust colors. Okay, cool stuff like that, and also more kind of like practical stuff where, say, this image here, the colors are great but we just want to make them, lift them up a little bit. Can you see before, after, before, after? Okay, just to kind of like subtle adjustments, more of the day-to-day use of Photoshop's hue adjustments. All right, let's go and learn that now in Photoshop. All right, let's look at the first step. Let's go to File, let's go to Open, and in your source files, open up O6A, the first one. Okay, thank you TJ. Let's go to Open, make sure we're on our Move tool, and we are going to go back to our Adjustments panel. Okay, so we looked at levels earlier, and then we looked at vibrance. Now we're going to look at the kind of next step, and we're going to look at this one called Hue and Saturation. Click on him, he's the first of the second line. And to start off with, I want you to grab just this main hue slider here, grab the little diamond in the middle with the triangle, and drag all slowly to the left. Ooh. And then slowly to the right. Cool, huh? Okay, it's just a way of going through and deciding and changing the hue of an image, okay, completely. Now this works perfectly for this particular one because there's only one color in the image. Let's close this now and jump into an image that has multiple colors. And we're gonna have to use a couple of little tricks to adjust that. So let's save and close this one and open up the next file. I'm not gonna save mine just because. I've done that before. Let's go to File, Open, and let's open up O6B. Okay, and this one here by Felipe. If I pronounce people's names wrong, I'm sorry, I try. Let's look at with this layer selected, let's go to Adjustments, and let's open up Hue and Saturation. Now, if I grab this hue slider now and I want to change this to say pink, if I change it to pink, where's pink? Okay, you notice it's changing the stalk as well. So just by dragging the slider up the top by itself, it just changes everything. It's quite cool, kind of hip, acidy dream type. But let's say that I want to kind of isolate this particular color. Okay, so where it says master, drop that down, and let's go down to reds. Okay, and now it's going to only adjust the red color. Cool, huh? Okay, so that's a way of, adjusting a specific color. You might have a product that you've got a photograph of, or some clothing. And the cool thing about it is that it's quite a unique color within the image. If there's multiple things that are red in this image, this is not gonna work. But we'll look at something called masking later on to fix that. But for the moment, okay, because we're putting out one red thing, it's a nice, quick, easy way to adjust the hue. Now, not just adjusting the hue, we can go through and adjust the saturation of that color as well for that one particular color. Okay, the other thing is, let's say that you want to change the color of the stalk. Now, what happens, especially in kind of like landscape and kind of nature shots, is you're like, okay, I want to adjust that color, which is green, clearly, because it's the stalk of a rose. But if you look real closely, it's actually, if I zoom right in, it's actually a bunch of kind of ochres and yellows that make up that. Kind of my brain tells me that it is green, because that's what green stalk should be. So if I go to say greens and say I want to adjust you, not a lot happens, you can see. Okay, it's because actually this guy is made up of mainly yellows. So that happens quite a bit. You're looking, maybe this thing's broken. It's not, it's just like the yellows are just not, the greens aren't very green. They're more of a yellow color. So now I've got yellows and adjusting them. You can see I can adjust it. And often what I'll end up doing is adjusting the greens to look more like the kind of green. You can see I've just dragged it a little bit to the right and it's kind of made it green. I'm going to drag up the saturation, okay, just as an exaggeration to show you that, yeah, it's actually the yellows. Now the lightness slider here, I never use. It does a pretty weird thing. It just kind of like covers we're looking at this down here, covers it all in white or removes it all black. Okay, so I never use that slider. If you want to play with the lights and darknesses, okay, go back to the levels like we did earlier in the tutorial. Remember that's under adjustments and here under levels. Okay, so you might not be doing this particular exercise very much where you kind of want to replace a color. Let's look at kind of more thing that I end up running into a lot more. So let's save and close this one. I'm not saving it. And let's go to File, Open. And in here, we're going to open John Mark Arnold, okay, his 06C. Let's open up that one. Okay, so this is kind of typically what I end up doing. I don't end up changing like the whole rose, like changing a completely different color. I don't get to do that very often. Most of my work is I got an image from a photographer, I'm using it for a project, and I just want to make the greens a little greener and the sky a little bluer. So to do that, it's the exact same technique as we did for the previous one, but we're going to be a little bit more subtle with it. So Adjustments panel, let's go to Hue and Saturation. And what I want to do is adjust this grass here. Now, like in the last one, grass in this case is actually more yellow than it is green. If I grab the greens and try to adjust the colors, nothing much is changing. So if I go to yellows though and adjust them, okay, you can see there's a lot more yellows going on in that grass. And what I want to do is, instead of making them purple, which you could do, okay, I'm just going to make them a bit more green. Okay, so I'm dragging a little bit to the right. Now, on, off, you can see. Yeah, a bit more green. And what I also might do is grab the saturation, just drag it up a tiny bit. Now, it's those kind of like tiny adjustments. These are the hard ones because you're like, it's like, sometimes you're like, you want to just make it scream like you fixed it in Photoshop, but often it's just more kind of like subtle changes than it is. That's the kind of, I guess, the nice adjustments are just tiny little corrections. Same with the sky. The sky is actually made up of a mixture of blues and cyans often. So you have to kind of pick the blues, check that they're in there by dragging the saturation up. You can see that they're definitely there. So what I want to do is probably just bump them up a little bit. Okay, on, off, just a little bit more maybe. And in here, you might go to the cyans and I crank up the saturation, definitely in there as well. So there's a mixture of both of those colors. And you can decide whether you want to kind of adjust them and make them maybe a little bit more blue or, yeah, there you go. Just a little bit of touch that way. And I'm going to crank up the saturation a little bit. Okay, so on, off, on, off. It might be a little bit hard to see in the video, but hopefully if you're playing along on your monitor, you'll be able to see it quite clearly. Yeah, it's these kind of like tiny adjustments are the things that I spend most of my time doing, just little fixes. One thing before we go is this one here says colorize. If I click on colorize, it kind of removes all the colors and gives you an option for the slider here to do like a sepia or just kind of a single tone color. Okay, so this can be kind of cool for that sepia effect. Okay, find a kind of a reddy or yellowy kind of dust color, and yeah, easy, just turn that on and off. Okay, as a colorize is good for that. Okay, so I'm going to actually save this one here now. And what I want to do is I've got an exercise for you. If you go to File, Open, the last one in that is 06D. It's by Ellis Krvek. I'm just gonna, anyway, let's click Open. Okay, and this one here, beautiful photograph, and it's cool the way it is, but let's say that we want to make this guy's a little bluer and the trees and the water a little bit more saturated. So I'd like to use you to do this for an example. Okay, so go to your adjustments panel and use your hue and saturation. And I want you to see if you can practice your techniques, raising the blues, see if there's any cyans in there, greens, and just kind of, I guess, make it a little richer. All right, my friends, that is going to be the end of hue adjustments. Okay, we did some big sliding adjustments for that first image, but then we got a little bit more and more specific as we got along, just kind of tweaking the colors towards the end of this exercise. So do your homework, and I will see you in the next video where we start working with text. Hi there, in this tutorial, we're going to look at type in Photoshop. Now we're going to create a little mini design project. It's going to be a postcard, Mother's Day sale type thing. And yeah, we're going to explore type throughout. All right, let's get started. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is, let's say we've got an image we want to use, right? Which is, let's go to File, Open. And in your source files, it's called 07A. We've used this image before by Errol. Okay, let's click Open. And instead of trying to resize this into a postcard size, that's what people tend to do. Let's say you want to do something for like a US letter or A4, is they try and grab this and try and reshape it into the right dimensions. It's way easier in Photoshop to go to File, New, create the right size, then drag that in and use our cool little scale option to kind of resize it so it fits. It's definitely easier doing it that way. What you'll also find in Photoshop is that you can just type in your inches along the top here, or switch it to centimeters or millimeters, depending on which part of the world you're in. What we're going to do is we're going to go to print, and there's some default templates in here. Okay, you can see there's US letter, legal, tabloid, A4. Click on this little view all presets. And what I'm looking for is one in here called, it's not in here at all. Okay, it's under art and illustration, and it's this one here called postcard. So with it selected, it's done a few things. It's given it the right height and width. No, in different parts of the world, it's actually different sizes. We're going to use the US, and what we're going to do is we're going to make a landscape. Okay, just for this one. We're not going to change anything else. Just make sure yours looks like mine in terms of resolution and color mode, but we'll discuss that later on. Let's click Create. Now let's go and save this thing. And what you'll notice is that saves grayed out. It's weird. Photoshop, it's one of the kind of quirks of Photoshop. It says, well, you haven't done anything to this, so I'm not going to save it. So if I grab the text tool and started adding text, it would start. It'd allow me to save, or just go to File, Save As. Okay, and I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to put it into my source files, and I'm going to call this one Dan's Postcard. Postcard even. Let's click Save. Now we're going to use our fancy trick we learned earlier in this course. We're going to go to our image of flowers. We're going to grab our move tool. We're going to click, hold, drag, 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 drag into the tab. Keep holding the mouse down and then let go down here. All right, so it's the wrong size. Okay, I kind of did that on purpose so we can practice our resizing. And what we're going to have to do is we're going to look at rotating it as well. So make sure our layer here is selected. It's got the little icon or the little thumbnail of our flowers. Let's zoom out. Who remembers what the shortcut is? That's right, Command minus on a Mac, Control minus on a PC. We're going to zoom out so we can see the edges like we did earlier. Let's go to Edit, let's go down to Transform, and let's look at Scale. Okay, and he's actually reasonably the right size, but I want to rotate it around. So let's go to Edit, Transform, and let's go to Rotate. Okay, and it's the same kind of thing. Grab any of the corners, okay, and drag it around. Now, remember when we did the scale, we held Shift and it would kind of resize it proportionately. Holding Shift in this case, when we're using the Rotate tool, okay, it just kind of locks it into 45-degree angles. Okay, so it's just nice little steps. So I'm going to rotate mine around so it looks like that. Then I'm going to go back to Scale, Edit, Transform, Scale, grab the corner, and remember holding Shift, drag down, and let's get it to a sort of size like this. You can drag the center it afterwards by letting go. You can let go of Shift and just drag the center. Don't drag the little dot in the center. Okay, it's just the center of rotation. Just won't do what you want. Just drag anywhere else in here and we can move it around. Okay, I'm not too worried too much about the edges at the moment. Okay, I just want to get it kind of lined up-ish like that. Now remember, nothing works. Why is it not working? We've got to press Enter on your keyboard or Return. Okay, just say, I'm done. That's what I wanted to do. All right, so let's now add some text. Okay, so down here is your text tool. Now, actually, let's zoom in a little bit. You remember the shortcut is Command plus on a Mac, Control plus on a PC. Grab the type tool. This is capital T here. Okay, and what you can do is, we're going to learn the kind of two ways of adding text. The first way is clicking once. Okay, and you can type in, and it just kind of goes forever. I'm just mashing away at the keyboard to give you an instance. Now, if your font is a whole lot bigger or a different color, it doesn't really matter. What you might do is select it all and change the font either over here. You can do it in both places, the top or over here on the right, down to something like 10 point for this example. So that's one way of adding type. When you're finished, okay, you can go back to the move tool, and that kind of commits that change. And I want to show you the other way of adding type. That's good for headings. So, but if you've got some like say body copy that wants to go in, grab the type tool. And before you start typing, actually, no, that's fine. Okay, is just to click, hold, and drag out a box. Okay, whereas before we just clicked once and we started typing. This one we clicked, held the mouse down and dragged out a box. What this is cool for is I'm mashing away at the keyboard again, but you can see it kind of breaks onto different lines. Okay, it's a good way of putting in body copy. If yours is like mine, there's these massive big gaps in between the lines here. Okay, I'm going to select it all by using my type tool and just kind of like drag up across all of this. And then over here under line spacing, it is way too big. I'm going to set it back to auto. Cool. So let's look at styling some of this now. So those are the two ways of doing it. Clicking once, and the other one is clicking and dragging a box, depending on what you need. Remember to finish this, go back to the move tool. Great. So what I'm going to do is I've got these two layers, crazy letters in them. So this first layer here, actually, it doesn't really matter what layer you're on. If we grab the type tool, click anywhere in this top part, I'm going to select all the text, hit delete, and I'm going to type in some proper text now. So yeah, we're going to cover a few more text features, but now it's a little bit, we're doing a little bit of design work. Okay, so Mother's Day sale. I'm going to select all the text. I'm going to make it white. Now you can see I can use the color here or color there. I've got the text selected. I'm going to pick color. And in terms of choosing a color, you use this little slider to pick the hue. Okay, let's say you wanted pink and then you click there for pink. You can see there's my text in that color. You might have to move this out of the way to see what you're doing. What I want is white, and to get white is to grab this little dot that you've put anywhere and just click, hold, and drag it, drag it, drag it, and drag it kind of like way into this corner. I drag it a little bit past. That means it gets all jammed up in the corner and it's perfectly white. Click OK. I'm using Garamond for my main one just because it's a font that you're likely to have as well. So in terms of font size, that works for me. What I might do is after day, put a return in. Okay, and if the spacing between the lines is not great, okay, we're going to have to adjust it. The other thing we might have to do is this text here is kind of overlapping the one at the back. So let's grab this layer, okay, which is the top one there. I'm going to grab my move tool, and I'm going to say, come down a little bit, buddy. Say way down here. Back to Mother's Day, and I'm going to drag you down a little bit. Awesome. Don't worry if you're finding it a little bit hard to read against the background with your font. We're going to add drop shadows in a future video to this particular text. Let's look at a couple of advanced features. Let's grab the type tool. Let's click once, okay, because I just want a text box that runs on forever. And I'm just going to put in, let's say, save the date. Save the date, fonts. Okay, so pick any font. And let's say I want to make it all capitals. So over here, you've only got some basic kind of features. You've got the font, the kind of font weight, basically whether it's light or bold, and some other basic stuff. You got this advanced button. It's not that advanced. Click on it and it gives you kind of, I don't know, some of the stuff that I'm used to seeing in a type panel. And the one that I want is this third one in, and it says just make all caps. So that's what I want to do. I want to drag the font down. Now, another little tip for fonts, you can see it goes from 18 to 24. Like, what if you want 20? You can just type it in there and hit return, and that'll force it to be. Or the trick that I use quite a lot is, doesn't matter if you're using this one or this one down here. I'm going to close them back in. See this little icon here? If you click and hold and drag on that icon, so I'm just clicking, holding, and dragging left and right. If you've got a really slow computer, it doesn't work that flash, but I'm dragging mine. I find that's just a little easier to work out what font I want. Great, I've got mine down to 12 point. Okay, my move tool, and I click it, drag it there. Grab my Mother's Day layer and drag you about there. And this last layer down here, okay, this crazy layer, I'm going to move him to about there. Now I don't have specific text to go in here, so I'm going to show you a little trick before we leave. We're going to grab the type tool, I'm going to click in here, I'm going to select all this text, we're going to hit delete. Okay, and what we're going to do is put in something called placeholder text or lorem ipsum. And it's just a really common way of putting in placeholder text. I know that, let's say that I'm the designer in this job, but not the copywriter, and it's coming from the client and I know it's not coming today. So I just want to put some text in. So cursor flashing, go up to type and come down to paste as an outside or a kind of a break at the end. The other good tip is to select on the layer and you might need to go into advanced. Now, don't think advanced is super nerdy stuff. It's just, actually there's some good usable stuff in there. And you also know if you toggle this or keep clicking it, it switches between your advanced character and advanced paragraph. So if you're looking for indents and other stuff, just keep clicking on this, mash away until you find the one you need. All right, my friends, let's finish this one and get into the next video where we look at doing type on a path. Hi there, in this video we are going to do things like this where we get the, say, photographer's name to flow along the edge of the leaf here, okay, along a path. And down the bottom here we're going to make this particularly ugly badge where we get the text to flow along a circle, and then we're going to make some bulgy text in the middle, okay, all learning cool skills using text in Photoshop. All right, so to get started, let's open the file to get started with. Let's go to File, Open. And in your source files, okay, you can open up 08 warped text. Now, if you are following along this tutorial series in order, okay, you can just use the file that you created in the last video rather than opening up this one. Okay, but if not, open up this file. And what I'm going to have to do, what you might have noticed, is I picked some new fonts. I just couldn't handle Garamond anymore. So I picked some fonts. The trouble is you're not going to have these fonts. So what I'm going to have to do is, I don't want there to be any kind of trouble when you're trying to open the document and it's saying you've got no fonts. So what I'm going to have to do is click the top one, hold shift, grab the last one, and dun, 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 we're going to go to layer and we're going to do the merge layers. Now your file's going to open, it's not going to have any trouble, but the text is not editable.